I love the term philanthropic capital. I think we might title this episode Philanthropic
Yeah,
Capital.
I like
It's a great
that.
word or a great phrase.
Welcome to Alt Investing Made Easy, where we explore the complex world of alternative assets. I'm Roland, a securities attorney, investment advisor, and your co-host.
And I'm Sarah, an investment advisor and corporate attorney, and your other co-host. We'll guide you through real estate, private equity, and more, making complex topics accessible.
Tune in for insights that empower your financial journey.
Let's make alt investing easy, one episode at a time.
Welcome, everyone, to Alt Investing Made Easy. Today, we're thrilled to have a friend join us, Stephanie Sessa. She's a Senior Donor Relations Officer at Austin Community Foundation, and she's here today to talk to us about donor-advised funds. Thanks so much for spending time with us today, Stephanie.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to dive into the conversation.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Stephanie. And this is an investor education podcast, and we have had episodes before talking about charitable giving and qualitative estate planning. And so I always get personally excited whenever we can talk about charitable giving, because I think it can be a really powerful tool in a way that maybe is unexpected. But Stephanie, please tell us a little bit about yourself, your professional life, and how that relates to Austin Community Foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have the privilege of working with the wonderful team at ACF. We really focus on mobilizing ideas and resources to make Central Texas a better place for all of us. My specific role lives at the intersection of philanthropy, tax strategy, and community impact. So really figuring out how we can deploy philanthropic capital in a way that improves outcomes for Central Texans. And so I got into this line of work from a previous decade of service in the nonprofit education space, and did a lot of fundraising, operations work. And when my family relocated to Texas, I was really looking for an organization that was place-based, rooted locally, and that's what led me here. So I'm excited to I've been with the team for almost 4 years now.
That's really great. And, I think specifically today, we're planning to talk about donor-advised funds. But just briefly, maybe we'll get into it a little later, Stephanie. Like, what led you into working in community work and nonprofits in the first place?
Yeah, so I grew up in a military family. So, it was really modeled for me from my dad's commitment to public service to find a way to give back. And, my mom volunteered all when I was growing up. So it just really drove a lot of the decisions I made when I thought about my career and what impact I wanted to have. In particular, as I mentioned, I did start off specifically in the education nonprofit space. And, my family really emphasized the importance of education in improving outcomes, for my dad in particular, by joining the Army and getting college paid for, that really led to a lot of his success later on in life. And, his also ended up, after the tremendous military career, had a tremendous private sector career as well. And again, really credited education to that. So that's kind of what got me to dip my toes into the nonprofit space. And then as my career continued to develop, there's, so much wealth in this country in particular. And, really thinking about, leveraging some of my experience in strategic planning and figuring out how to deploy those resources in a strategic way is something that really energized me as I thought about shifting out of the education space more specifically and into more of a philanthropic advising type of role.
I think that's really great. I love the term philanthropic capital. I think we might title this episode Philanthropic Capital.
Like
it's a great word or a great phrase. So, Roland?
I thought, Stephanie, maybe at a real high level, give us the pitch for a donor-advised fund. If I'm a wealthy investor, I come to you and say, Stephanie, what is a donor-advised fund?
A donor advised fund is essentially a charitable checking account. So it's a charitable giving vehicle. It's always housed at a public charity, so a 501c3 institution like Austin Community Foundation, where I work. And essentially, a donor makes an irrevocable contribution into that fund. It's typically cash, stock, some sort of asset, and that donor will receive an immediate tax deduction for that gift, and then retain advisory privileges to recommend grants to nonprofits over time. And so that's where the advising piece of a donor advised fund comes in. And so, really, as an individual is thinking about their holistic financial picture, the key advantage to a donor advised fund is that it actually separates the tax event from the grant decision. So essentially, you can think about funding a donor advised fund in a high income year where you might be looking for that advice, from your CPA or financial advisor, like to make that larger charitable gift. But you can put that all into a donor advised fund and then deploy the dollars thoughtfully over time at the cadence and at the amount to the various nonprofits at your discretion.
So just to follow up, so until I designate how it's going to be deployed to the qualified underlying charitable organizations, the money remains in that account and it's managed by Austin Community Foundation.
That's right. So a donor advised fund can be invested in the market, which most of our fund holders do choose for that to happen. We have investment counsel that helps us make sure that we're good stewards of those dollars and investing them prudently and wisely. And that's really a win-win for us because that's ultimately more dollars going out into the community over time. So yes, that money will be invested, and then when a donor is ready to make distributions out of that fund, there's liquidity to be able to do that.
Well, that's
really
a
cool.
really good explanation, and I've mentioned before that while I'm a tax attorney and I know generally what a donor advised fund is, I couldn't tell you all the mechanics. So I'm learning alongside our audience a little bit today, and that was a really good explanation.
Yeah, it was. Stephanie, how would you, I'm sure you get asked this all the time. So how do donor advised funds compare to other giving vehicles such as private foundations or just direct gifting?
Yeah, so of course, we know that a lot of donors prefer to give direct gifts to an institution or a nonprofit charity, and that, of course, makes sense. I think a DAF really comes into play when you want that timing flexibility and you're in a liquidity year and perhaps haven't decided which organizations you want to support, but you can lock in that tax deduction now and then grant those dollars later. We have also seen a trend in people deciding to open a donor advised fund instead of a private foundation. A DAF really offers that similar grant making flexibility, but without the administrative burden of operating a private foundation. So you don't have to have a separate legal entity. There's no annual 990 PF filing. There's not a mandatory 5% payout requirement annually. And, generally lower costs to administer a DAF compared to a private foundation. And so, of course, private foundations do still make sense for families that really want that full governance control, a staffed entity where, they have program officers and so forth. But I'll say for many donors these days, a DAF delivers most of the functionality of a private foundation, but at much more efficient and cheaper way.
Mm.
Well, that's really good to know, and these are options that people would have, and I like the idea of being really deliberate and making sure that this is the charity that I want to give to, and that's kind of where my mind went, is maybe telling us a little about the impact that you've had, the charities that you serve, that ultimately your donors say, hey, I want to give to this charity, and stories about how the donors have helped those charitable organizations.
So ACF was founded in 1977. So we've been around for almost 50 years. And over that time period, we've deployed over $700 million into the community, which we're really proud of. reflective of the growth of Austin, it's really exciting to share that in 2025 alone, we granted out almost $100 million into the
Wow.
community. And so, again, reflective of Austin's growth, just more, I think, donor advised funds becoming more familiar to investors and in the marketplace. Of that almost 100 million that was granted, around roughly 60% of that stays local within Central Texas. But of course, anyone who has a donor advised fund with us is able to grant to any eligible 501c3 institution across the country. So, of course, if you attended a university outside of Texas, for example, and you may want to support your alma mater, you're still able to do that with your donor advised fund. And we also have the ability to grant internationally as well. We'll do some due diligence and vetting to ensure that those international organizations are operating equivalently to a United States-based 501c3. And so making sure that those dollars are invested securely as well. And so, we also do some grant making ourselves as a community foundation and invite donor advised fund holders to co-invest and participate in that grant making. We specifically invest in economic mobility for Central Texans and housing affordability. And so those are really our two pillars of our foundation-led grant making.
I just want to emphasize here, just for the audience, that and it's something that's maybe counterintuitive just because of the name Austin Community Foundation. But the key is that you don't. It's not confined. So if you use a donor advised fund with you all, then you can do anything you want, is provided, of course, it's within the requirements of what is required from a regulatory perspective. So I just want to emphasize that again, because it's not if you come to you that you're just investing in, say, Austin.
Exactly.
Really, it's where you want to go. And, the university example is a great example. Another question actually is, you take cash assets, securities, basically things that are easy to transfer and basically easy to administer and invest. But do you deal in real estate at all?
Yeah, we have the ability to accept a lot of different complex asset types. And that's really where DAFs as a charitable giving tool can be quite powerful.
Right.
To zoom out from the real estate question in particular, if you donate long-term appreciated assets, you generally can deduct the fair market value and avoid capital gains tax on those donated shares.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
With that in mind, of course, appreciated stock and securities is
we're going to keep going. Don't worry. Yeah. Yeah.
It's typically, a popular asset type that we receive.
Right.
However, we, are always willing to have a conversation around other types of assets that can be accepted. And so, we really pride ourselves on our flexibility, our nimbleness in doing that due diligence around complex asset gift acceptance. So yes, have accepted different real estate holdings as charitable donations in the past. Closely held business interests.
Wow.
Which
okay.
we can
Yeah.
talk about oil and gas rights. So there's a whole, wide array of assets outside of just cash and publicly traded securities that should be thought about as charitable assets to give, and might be better overall for that donor's financial picture.
Right. That's really interesting. And I think that's another key issue for the audience is you're not confined to movable securities or cash. It sounds like basically you're able to in other words, like offload an asset that and give it to somebody else to deal with in a certain way, and get the tax benefit of it in the end. So that I think is what, means this is why somebody needs to come talk to a specialist like you. I think some of these things are just not immediately intuitive just from, thinking about Austin Community Foundation and donor advised funds, but they're just terms in there, like the funds. People probably could think, oh, it has to be cash. And this comes from another conversation we had with someone who works at another charity. And she was like, people need to know that they can donate securities to us. And then we can benefit even better because we can have long-term, dividend income from that. So it's really, I think, great to hear about that again from a slightly different direction. What would you say for people that you talk to who are looking to make a charitable gift are the most common misunderstandings people have about donor advised funds?
I think one common misconception is that a DAF is just an investment account with charitable branding. And it's really important to know that once you open a DAF and make the contribution into that DAF, that's an irrevocable gift, and the donor no longer owns those assets and can't take them back. So always want to make sure people understand that before opening a fund. Another misconception is that, or criticism that, of course, happens, is that DAFs are often, criticized around parking money indefinitely, because they don't have that same 5% payout requirement that a private foundation does. And so, that said, the flexibility for a DAF really allows thoughtful strategy, and the intent is not for those funds to just sit there and be stagnant. And so ACF, and I know all community foundations really actively encourage ongoing grant making and engagement, and have policies in place to ensure that those funds are deployed and not just sitting in that charitable checking account, so to speak.
Well, and that makes sense that a community foundation would be sort of your mitigation of that particular issue, right? Because it's almost like there's a dual mandate. There's the mandate of the foundation vis-a-vis its role that it's supposed to play in the community, and then it's the mandate. It's the contractual agreement it has with the donors, which is essentially how that works. And in the end, it's all about a relationship, the donor relationship with the fund's relationship with everybody that might be able to access funding from ACF, for example. So, and I think charitable giving has to work that way, right? Because otherwise there wouldn't be any tax advantages that attach it to just putting your money in a different investment account. And this is something we encounter just as a side note. There kind of is no free lunch, and I work with some really senior estate planning attorneys in my firm, and I love hearing from them because they have so much experience, and there are always a lot of trust structures out there. It's very common to hear out there in AI tools and online and everything that, there's all these amazing ways you can hide your money from the IRS, and you can do this and you can do that, and in the end, they actually don't generally work. And I think that must be the same in the charitable giving arena, that there's an intentionality that just as you say, the most critical piece of charitable giving, which would be the same if you just gave it directly to anyone, also any charitable endeavor that was legitimately structured under the tax code, this would be, again, it's irrevocable, right? That's the whole point, really. That's why you get the tax benefit. So your money is going out of your control. And the question is, how much influence do you have over what happens next? So, and I know that's why people sometimes do like to set up their own proprietary structures. But in any event, let's move on to well, this is great, actually, for people that are listening. Why do you want to even care about a philanthropic strategy or think of part of your capital as philanthropic capital? How is that commonly seen as part of financial planning? Now, I know, Stephanie, you're not a financial planner, so I'm not asking you to give actual advice, and I'll caveat that here for the audience. But in your experience, what do you kind of see as the general way this is all working?
Yeah, I think for, many investors or individuals, philanthropy is one of, if not the largest discretionary capital allocations that you'll ever make. And yet it's often the least integrated into a financial strategy. A lot of times people are just writing, a check to support an event, or, as they hear about causes. But when you think about putting a more strategic approach to those charitable dollars, think about what longer lasting and more intentional impact you might be able to have on the causes that you care about. And so, yes, there's certainly the aspect of charitable planning that intersects with liquidity events and those high income years, right? So, of course, care about philanthropic strategy from that perspective, right? A donor advised fund in particular can smooth that tax exposure, as I've mentioned, reduce capital gains and create that flexibility about when and how you're making those charitable contributions. To give a specific example of, especially in Austin, where there are so many entrepreneurs, we have often worked with founders who come to us as part of their longer term exit planning. And, by contributing a portion of those closely held business interests before any inkling of sell or purchase agreement is on the radar. I do have to caveat by saying that, that entrepreneur is able to secure a tax deduction, avoid the capital gains on that specific portion. And then take their time to deploy those funds strategically, once those shares have liquidated and the DAF is funded with cash. And so it's really, again, a win-win. They are, of course, saving and it's helping their overall financial planning picture. But it's also a win for the community and thinking about how those that philanthropic capital can be deployed. And so I really think the lesson here is that philanthropy works best when you can be strategic and proactive about it, really take that longer term lens and see how it fits within your bigger financial picture and not just think about cash, as it relates to charitable giving.
So I have actually this might be the most simplistic question, but also maybe relevant. Say I set up a donor advised fund. And I may have a liquidity event, a liquidity year, and make a nice donation to it. But the next year is kind of calm, and I just do regular, like you say, the school band needs a donation, and this needs a donation, and my grandkids or my kids need this, and the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, and and I do want to just write those checks. Would a better strategy be, okay, I've got this relationship with ACF. Let me call them up and say, hey, let's allocate through this, or let me put some more money in. Like, I'm sending $5,000 over today because I have these different little things and I'm going to forget about them. And, I need to make sure that I'm doing this all within a plan. Is that something that kind of would make sense? Because I'm just thinking about the administrative side of it for somebody, and how to even keep track of all those little donations. It seems like if you make one larger donation, larger being, say, $10,000, I don't even know if you accept that small, but then, have a bunch of little spots to allocate it to. That would create more administrative burden for ACF, but I could see how that would be a practical solution to kind of keep people going with keeping track of all of that stuff. At the end of the year, you have one receipt for your donation to your donor advised fund rather than all the other stuff.
Exactly. I think you're describing one of the most compelling value propositions for a donor advised fund. It keeps all your charitable giving in one place. And so a lot of donors will engage in what we call a bunching strategy, where you'll that donor will give upfront, perhaps a couple of years of worth of what they intend to give out charitably. Again, that money is invested in the market, so ideally growing over time. And then they can use their fund at ACF to make those ongoing ad hoc gifts as things come up, for example, to support your kids' school and so forth. And, that's what we're here for. Yes, it's administrative work for us, but, we have an online portal where, donors can go in and make those grant requests. Of course, we also really pride ourselves on white glove service and a human connection and touch at ACF. And so, if you open a fund tier, you're going to have a real person and a dedicated relationship manager to reach out to if you ever need support with your grant making as well. So, so we're here to support that. And that donor is getting that one tax receipt letter for making their gift into their donor advised fund, and then you can still support all of the causes that they care about.
Yeah, I can see how that's honestly very compelling just for busy people who have successfully made money to where they have a philanthropic capital strategy that they need to have, right? This is a very practical part of it. But actually, that I know we have some other important things to discuss, but just to finish this part out, do you have a minimum? What's the minimum for opening a donor advised fund? This would be really good to know.
Yeah, we have a minimum of $5,000 to open a donor advised fund. So, we really believe in democratizing philanthropy and, keeping those minimums low. And so, it's, we have a wide variety of fund sizes at ACF. So
Right.
everything from, $5,000 all the way up to the tens of millions of dollars. And so we're here to support anyone in the community who is interested in making a philanthropic impact.
I want to just reemphasize that point because that, I love that democratization of philanthropy. We talk about democratization of capital and how our securities laws in the United States allow people to build their wealth from starting with very little to, needing a philanthropic capital strategy. But I do think that that's really brilliant because I think a lot of us out there, even if we don't perceive ourselves as needing a philanthropic capital strategy, actually, you probably are giving $5,000 a year to the basketball team and the band and all these different things. And, some of that has to be done just as not an official gifting strategy, primarily because those aren't authorized organizations for issuing tax receipts. But on the other hand, there probably are many of them that you could be capturing for your own tax planning, regardless of where you are and sort of the spectrum of wealth that gets involved in this. So I'm really glad to hear that because I know we're here to talk about the more complex stuff. We're about to talk about the more complex asset types that we touched on already a little bit. But it's really good to hear that this is an open door and everybody pretty much has a seat at the table, recognizing that there is, of course, totally fine if you don't have such $5,000 to fund a DAF with. That's, completely fine. But if you want to think about it, it's good for people to know. Or if you want to get used to it, you can start small and see how it goes, see how the relationship develops with ACF or another organization. So, well, listen, let's cover these last few things because I really want to hear about the impact investing that we had kind of set out and things to talk about. And with the complex asset types or appreciated assets, we talked about it for a second, but why don't you just go through that again just quickly for our audience?
Yeah, so ACF and many sponsors have the ability to accept complex assets. And so while we see cash and publicly traded appreciated, securities being the most commonly accepted asset types into a donor advised fund, we have accepted and done due diligence on a whole wide variety of assets. So everything from real estate to closely held business interests, oil and gas rights, crypto. We even accepted a steamboat back in the day. Not that that's a common asset that most folks have at their disposal. But needless to say, we at ACF really are always willing to engage in a conversation to explore if we are able to accept a complex asset that can be, liquidated and then deployed for philanthropic purposes. That's some of the most fun work we do around finding those creative solutions for our donors. So yeah, don't hesitate to give us a call if there are any of those.
Yeah, I'm already thinking of a few people I think I need to introduce you to. Yeah. All right, great. So what about impact investing? Maybe what do we mean by that would be the place to start, and then how a donor advised fund can be involved.
Yeah, so donor advised funds can do impact investing, and I think this is a really evolving and exciting area for us. So at ACF specifically, we offer opportunities for charitable capital to be deployed in ways that generate both financial and community return. And so we have two different fund vehicles that folks can invest in that essentially operate as impact investing vehicles. The first is called Fund ATX, which is an investment vehicle that's really designed to deploy capital into initiatives that support economic mobility for Central Texans. And so that usually is structured as a low-cost loan to a nonprofit organization or community development institution. And so once that loan is repaid and has generated that financial return, that philanthropic capital is recycled back into the community to invest in more projects. So many of our donor advised fund holders who know that they may not be granting out all of their fund balance right away will actually choose to invest a portion of their DAF into Fund ATX, because instead of it just sitting there, they let that money go to work and get that financial return, but also that social return as well. And then the second impact investing vehicle we have is called the Housing Accelerator Loan Fund, and that provides flexible, low-cost capital to affordable housing developers across the community. And so, we've done a lot of research in this space to figure out where philanthropy can help play a role in these really large-scale projects. And so, oftentimes there are bridge loans or financial gaps that need to be filled so that projects can keep moving quickly and not get stalled. And so, yeah, we've raised over $20 million for that loan fund, which is really exciting.
Wow.
And can then cycle those funds into new projects once those loans are repaid. And so those are just two examples of how ACF has engaged in impact investing. And I think, for many more investment-minded donors, it's really appealing because it aligns investment principles with social impact and being mission-focused as well.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And I'm going to circle back to on that particular topic with you offline. So, Stephanie, it's just so great. And for everyone in the audience, I just want to emphasize that having someone as articulate as Stephanie here on, she's covering a lot of ground, and it's incredibly educational, not just for me and for Roland, but also we hope for you. I think this is such an important area and people need to know about it. Lastly, let's talk about impact and legacy. Well, we did talk about, but this kind of ties into it with impact investing in general. But when you think about legacy and impact investing and your DAFs, do you have anything further you want to add about that?
Yeah. As individuals age, right, your perception of impact and legacy certainly evolves over time. And although this conversation today has been heavily rooted, of course, in, tax deductions and financial planning, really, the most meaningful conversations that I have with individuals are really about their values and what impact they want to see in the world. And so, really a DAF is just a tool, right? And, for us at ACF, the bigger opportunity is helping individuals and families align the success that they've found financially with the type of community and environment that they want to help build. And so, while some donors, of course, want that immediate responsive giving, others are thinking more multi-generationally about their legacy and their charitable giving. And a DAF really allows you to do both things, right? You can support flood relief efforts in the time of crisis, and you can also be thinking about your charitable giving over a 10-year, 20-year time horizon. And so, to help bring this to life, I've worked with a family who really wanted to get their teenage children, started to get invested in those values of giving back and philanthropy, but didn't want to establish a private foundation, due to that administrative burden and complexity. And so you can use a DAF as part of that, annual family meeting that you have. And we've worked with families where, the kids will do their own research on a cause that they care about and present some, grant recommendations for, the family to engage in. And, it really becomes that governance training ground for families. You can, instill the values and also, connect with your family in a more meaningful and deeper way. And so, we really love to support families who are looking to engage in those types of conversations. We've even had elementary, kids come in with their families, just to get exposure to it. And so, that's some of the most, the best parts of the work for sure. And then, yeah, when you think about a DAF, in terms of, more specifically in terms of, the nitty gritty nuts and bolts of estate planning, a donor has the right to name a successor advisor, on that fund, that would be responsible for overseeing the grant distributions upon their passing. You can also choose to convert a fund into a permanent endowment that ACF can then use to engage in grant making aligned with, community priorities. ACF has $650 million of assets under management, and 38% of those funds are permanently endowed, which means we are
Wow.
here as a permanent piece of community infrastructure
Right.
to engage in grant making and be responsive to the needs of Central Texans forever. And, we know what the needs are today, and we'll have that flexibility to be able to support what might come down the road as well. And so yeah, we can be a great partner for folks looking to thinking about legacy and impact, and not just thinking about, where should I give, but what change am I trying to create, and how does my capital get us there?
Yeah. That's just incredible. I mean, again, I'm going to reemphasize. I mean, I think what you're saying makes sense, especially when you start to talk about legacy planning and the necessary education for future generations to be seeped in the values of essentially whether the family has generational wealth or whether it's the individual is the current generation who's kind of had a major wealth building life, I guess. It's there's a lot in legacy planning where a lot can go wrong in future generations, and so having a steadfast partner like Austin Community Foundation is what I'm hearing saying is that it's like a consultant. It's a type of a very specialized financial advisor, right? Who's there next to you to help the future generations understand and just keep on the right track with things, because there's life is complex and there's a lot of things to keep track of as an adult. So as a child, to slowly learn how to take care of those things is something that I've heard from a lot of friends and colleagues, people that I know that work in wealth management in general, and specifically with emerging and fully private family offices. So listen, Stephanie, we are at about 40 minutes, and I'm so grateful that you took time to spend with us today. I'd love to have further chats if there's ever an opportunity to do that. I think definitely this area of philanthropic capital is very important to people who are already interested in alternative investing and being educated about that. So everything you've had to say is so relevant for our audience, even though it's not the exact business of making the money, which is what we talk about a lot of times too, right? So I appreciate your time and just the sheer amount of education you've given us as a gift. So thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, great. So thanks everyone for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next time on Alt Investing Made Easy. Take care.